Mhm. Welcome to the History of LA Ska one-on-one sessions. I'm Junor Francis, and this series celebrates Ska, rocksteady, and vintage reggae scenes in Southern California and beyond through insightful conversations with the legends and modern-day players, including those behind the scene. This is the 23rd one-on-one session and our 8th in this new podcast YouTube series. I want to say thanks to each and everyone who has been supporting us from day one. Now, interestingly enough, this is the first time that we have the pleasure of talking with two exciting guests at the same time. Please help me welcome Kat Aguirre, and she'll correct me later on. But let me tell you about her background. She's a former keyboardist for Mobtown and co-founder of 150 Productions. And Luis Correa, AKA King Steady, a household name here in Southern California, is of the Steady Beat Recordings. Both are also behind the forthcoming documentary, A Steady Beat, Chronicles of Los Angeles 90s Ska Scene. Welcome to Kat and Luis. If I can address your both by first name, since everybody know you guys by first name. This is Los Angeles. I want to welcome you both.
Thank you, Junor.
Yes, indeed. So how are you continuing to stay healthy and safe, given we are not yet through the pandemic?
Being vaccinated and being careful and maintain your 6 feet.
That's the toughest one of all, right?
You follow simple rules. You know, stay away in enclosed rooms, stay out in the open air. Simple rules like that kind of eliminate and reduce the chances of being a negative statistic in the pandemic.
How about you, Kat? You follow the rules?
Mask. I don't go out much, so usually I'm masked up, except for today since we're doing this interview. I think I went out maybe last week, but we don't usually go out too much. I'm vaccinated also, so yeah.
Right, that's the way to stay safe, and it's very important. So, Kat, let's start with you. Please tell fans about your upbringing and musical influences.
My upbringing as far as coming into the ska scene, or just
here's a good thing. It's an open-ended question that you can take it either way.
Okay, so I was born in the Philippines. I came here when I was very young. Was in the East Coast for a while. I lived in Maryland, and then I was here in LA. Been in LA really ever since. Probably got into the ska scene about, I think, 10th grade in high school, and really got into, I remember one of the first albums that I heard was Dance Craze, which is that two-tone era. Got really into ska, learned that, you know, there were live shows going on, started going to live shows, and just really got into it. So, yeah.
Interesting. And how did your parents respond when you got into this music that perhaps they weren't even familiar with?
Yeah, I think they liked it a lot better than what I was into before. I was into kind of like punk rock and that loud screamo kind of music thing. And I went through a couple of different phases. So ska was a little bit more mellow to them. So they didn't have too much of a problem with it. My parents were really cool. You know, all my friends used to come over my house, even when I was into punk. We would have punk bands playing in my backyard. What's funny is Oliver's punk band actually played, Oliver Promotional 11 actually played in my backyard when I was in like a junior or a sophomore in high school. So yeah, they were really good about it. So
supportive parents insofar as your musical choice is concerned, right? So how and when did you meet Mobtown bandmates?
Well, I got into the ska scene about 90, I'm not sure if it's 90 or 91. Again, would go to shows. I would see Specs, Mobtown was playing. Obviously, I wasn't in the band then. I got a phone call all of a sudden from Wally, you know, asking me if I could play keys. Invited me down, and you know, we started practicing, and that was that. So that was about, I want to say late 92, 93 maybe.
And who else was in the band
So
besides you? You mentioned Wally at the time.
it was Wally, Jeff. I want to say, I'm trying to think if Mario Pittman was the drummer at that point. We had Gabe on trombone, I think. Gosh, I can't remember. I think that was about. Then there was some horn players. We had Amy. We had Chris, our baritone sax player. We didn't have Pepe, Malik, or Alex yet at that time, from what I remember. It was a pretty small band back then. And we had Robert. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. We had Robert Lagunas on trumpet also.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what other female singers and musicians do you remember from that era?
From that era?
From that period.
When I started, again, I was really into two-tone. So one of my favorite bands was The Selector. You know, in the 90s, gosh, what female bands were there? I mean, Ocean 11 came about middle 90s or early 90s, but I don't think they were in the, when I first got into the band, Ocean 11 wasn't formed yet. There wasn't too many females in bands at that point.
Right, I know.
From what I remember.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Oh no, there was Dance Hall Crashers. I remember them. What?
Go-Go.
The Go-Go's. Well, yeah, yeah. I'm thinking more like Scotty.
Body Snatchers.
Body Snatchers. Yeah, two-tone stuff. A lot more two-tone stuff, but there was the Dance Hall Crashers that were out here in the shanties, about middle 90s. Yeah, they kind of started that.
Nice, nice. So, Luis, you've been waiting patiently like a lamb to be slaughtered. So let me hit you with some questions now. First, who was the first Southern California Ska band that you remember seeing when you started
out? When I kind of got into the ska scene, well, you know, in junior high, two-tone was hot, and I knew friends that came to school dressed in their suits and like, what's going on, bro? What's up? But that was their thing, right? You know, like, yeah, cool, whatever. You know, and you know, before you know it, next thing you know, they're coming in, you know, dressed like greasers because the straight cats were big. You know, like, what's up with that, bro? Like, okay. But you know, it wasn't until I'd say in the early 90s, 90, 91, where a mutual friend, his name was Robert, he introduced me to Ray. And he's like, hey man, I have a friend named Ray. He's into ska music. I think you'd like him because he wants to do shows. I'm like, really? And Robert knew that I had done shows back in high school doing like, you know, backyard parties and so forth. So when I met Ray, he's like, I asked him, well, what do you want to do? He goes, you know, I want to book ska band. I'm like, ska band? Like, what are you talking about, ska band? This, you know, this is, I think, 91. Yeah, it was like 91, late 91. And I'm like, what's going on? And then he's like, here, have a tape, listen to this. And there was Operation Ivy, the Busters, the Toasters. There was a lot of bands that were at the time, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. It's not like what I remember ska is. And then once he gave me the tape and I started doing some research on ska, I'm like, wait a minute, this stuff came from the 60s. You know, I even bypassed the two-tone era. And I'm like, this stuff came from the 60s. This is weird. And then, and I said, well, let's go look at a band. Let's go look at a band. Let's go. I want to see what you want to do, so I could see how we can make it better. You know. So we went to a show, and I realized you couldn't see the band. You couldn't see the band because there's so many people crowding because there was no stage. So I said, one of the first things we got to do, we gotta build a stage, and then the thing about beer and so forth, I should just get a keg and sell the cup. A cup, and once the cup is, you know, they can drink all they want. Once it's, you know, $5 a cup, it's going, you make your money, and that's it. No more beer. That's it. And then, as a matter of fact, that's what happened in the first show we did because it recorded. Or she said, hey, the beer is gone. It's not our fault, but the beer is gone because everyone bought a cup for $5 and they just kept getting a refill. So there's no way to go wrong there. So we built a stage. We had a show. We recorded the show because during that time, I was in college, and my friend, I was taking sound engineering classes, and I had friends there, and they're like, "Dude, let's go. Let's record the show." I'm like, "Fine, bring me your gear," and they brought, you know, a recorder, some mics, and that's how the Blackpool compilations first recordings came to be. that night was Orange Street, and then I think a couple of the nights was Israelites, and then But that's kind of how I got into it. Ray introduced me into ska back in like 90, 91. 90, and by 92, we're doing backyard parties. And by 92, I discovered the Scatolites. And then I saw Hepcat. And then it took me into a different direction. Instead of doing the ska punk and what, I guess the two-tone style stuff, I kind of focused more on that. And that's why I guess, Steady Beat became known for stuff like that, because that's what I gravitated to, because it was more jazzy for me. It had more of a Latin feel than anything else than the punky stuff. And when I heard Hepcat from that on, then I heard the Stretching Out Scatolites, which was very slowed down ska. And I'm like, wow, no one's doing this. And then bands started coming out little by little. And before you know it, there was a whole stable of bands playing shows. 3 times a week there was bands. So I would credit Ray introducing the ska, and then from then on it's just a rabbit hole that you never get out.
So
the rabbit hole, because I'm hearing music right now, ska songs from back in the day, like I've never heard this song. And that's you love it. That's why we're here.
Interestingly, so out of utter and profound respect, you ought to give Ray his proper introduction. What's his last name? Because I know he has friends and families who will eventually see this.
Ramon Perez, Ray Perez, him and I started what was called the Blackpool at the time, and we started.
And about what time did Blackpool started?
Our first show was April of 1992. That was our first show that we did, and I think maybe we took about 2 to 3 months of preparing for that show, booking the band, getting the stage set, getting the stage made. So it was about a month and a half or 2 months before the show we actually did that. And the year prior, 91, is when we were looking at different bands and going to different backyard shows, and I was like, wow, it's kind of chaotic. Another thing we decided is like we needed security. So we always had security at our shows. Even if it was like a junkyard show, a backyard show, we always had security. Yeah, we did. Because Raymond's brother, security guard, and he just hired his buddy.
There you go. Interesting. So what are some of the earliest ska bands that you worked with during those early days?
I remember one of the first bands when I said I want to hear a band live, and there wasn't a show happening probably about 2 weeks, because shows were not always every week. And I said, well, where can we go see a band rehearse? And he's like, oh, we can go see a band rehearse in, I don't remember what it was, but it was at an Orange Grove. It was at an Orange Grove far away, like in the it was like a good hour, maybe an hour, Riverside maybe, or farther, where Orange Street is from, because that was one of the first band I saw, and they were playing in a gazebo in an Orange Grove, which was weird. And it was like me and like 4 or 5 other people watching them live, just rehearse. And I was like, yeah, man, this works. I think we can make it happen. And Orange Street was one of the first bands, and then I met Rich, and then the Israelites was another band, and Rich is like in the band. He's a promoter. He does a lot of stuff. So he's always trying to book different bands and telling me, you got to get this band, this band, this band. So he introduced me to a bunch of bands that later we had relationships, and at one point or another became on the label. He also did shows on his own too. So even when I was doing shows, he was doing some shows maybe across town, somewhere else, maybe in the or something.
Right.
So Israelite. So King Willie was another one. Yield English in Mobtown. I would say that Orange Street, Yield English, Mobtown, and Israelites were one of the first 4. Then after that came bands like King Willie, and then Unsteady, and those are early bands, and Filibuster, and the Mental Guru, Ocean 11, Yeska, Catch 22. Hepcat, obviously, and then you start going through the timeline, all these different bands that just keep popping up through the years, because a lot of these bands didn't exist before 1995. In 95, just all of a sudden all these bands came up. Dynamics popped up then, Allenton's in 94 more or less, and by 96 you had even more bands. So yeah, so those are kind of the first bands that, you know, I would say as a promoter, you kind of put them in rotation. Hey, you want to get let's do a show, but try not to book them all the time. But it happened anyway, because I was looking at some flyers from like the late 90s, and I saw that Mobtown, Ska, C-Spot. They're always playing together.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I saw them so many times together. Yeah, too. But now you look at it like, man, it would be so nice to see them again, right? So you'd see Mobtown, Ska, C-Spot, Allenton later coming into the picture, and, you know, Irie Beats filling in the gaps in there, Chris Murray, and, you know, that whole scene that was exploding in like 95, 96.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
So was the initial concept always live events coupled with recording music from the very onset?
The initial, what happened was, it was from the onset. My friends recorded these shows in the backyard, and as sound engineer students, you always want to see how you can improve a live recording, because that's kind of your test. If you can record a band live and make it sound good, it's golden. And, you know, you're always trying to do that. So they're like, yeah, let's record this band live. Let's play some mics. You know, let's get closer to the drums. Maybe get some bass. You know, different positions that they would want to place the recording set. And when we first started, I mean, that's what we did. But when I first started at clubs, doing clubs, I was a sound man. I was in charge of the sound, and Ray was in charge of the door and security. So I'd bring in the sound system and everything, and every band I would work with, I'd ask them if they had anything recorded. And they'd say no. Most of the time, no, because all the bands we were working with were like straight from backyards. They were graduating from backyards. And I said, well, let's record you guys and see if you sound good, and use that recording, give them a tape, it sounds good. And some of those tapes made it to the Blackpool compilation. And then after that, some of those bands, I decided, let's go to the studio. And then really, if you really look at the whole big picture, once I started booking all the bands, I started realizing all the bands together. That's when I decided, okay, we need to put a timeline. And that's when Scott Dente kind of came together. Wow. That's when you see all the bands that I actually work with, and you say, okay, bands that are actually forming and making things happen now. I kind of want to do it in like a timeline or a time capsule. So the art of doing that live started because no bands had anything recorded, and I wanted to offer them a service. Hey, let's record you tonight and see how you like it. And if it sounded good, they could reuse that demo.
Boy, what a brilliant idea! That was really and truly a brilliant idea. Now we have a lot of records. How many you said you have? 4,000 behind you?
Yeah,
no, I'm exaggerating the number, but a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, Kath, what's special about LA Ska scene and Steady Beats' involvement in it? Your involvement?
What's special about my involvement
right. But it was sort of a two-part question.
I think for the most part, one of the reasons why we wanted to focus on Luis from Steady Beats rather than what was already out there in mainstream is, I think, you know, a lot of the bands that have that style of that Latin jazz really came from him. And it came from, you know, whatever he produced, him putting bands together, putting the shows together and all those albums. And I think it has a very unique sound from ska, you know, in New York, ska in Germany, ska and everywhere else. You know, when we came from a two-tone where it was more of everybody was more centered on the black and white kind of thing in LA, because there was a lot of brown people. I mean, in a lot of bands, there's, you know, one, if at the minimum, at least one Hispanic person or Latin person in a band. So with that kind of brown, you know, coming into that black and white, it changed the sound, and I think it changed the culture. So I think you know, in that sense, it's very unique to LA.
Interestingly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never look at it like that. But right. So what are some of Mobtown's career highlights that you can remember? And how long were you with them again?
I was with Mobtown, so from about late 92, early 93. I leave Mobtown, I would say about 90. It was right after the first album, so the Rhythm of Ska came out. I was still around a little bit after that, but shortly, you know, was gone. And then they released the second CD after that, So Cactus Tears.
Mm-hmm.
So that was about 97, I think, 97, 98.
And why did you leave?
I think the band was, you know, to be very honest, I wasn't that good of a keyboard player, and they were just awesome musicians. And I think, you know, they wanted to just do better, and I didn't feel like I could kind of catch up to where they were at, I think.
So you weren't listening to Jackie Mittoo and Winston Wright and...
Absolutely, but could I play like them? That was a little tough.
It's meant to be a joke. It's meant to be a joke. So why do you feel more, again, Kath, why do you feel more LA bands didn't tour US or overseas, or at least they didn't as often as, say, some of the East Coast bands that went from coast to coast?
Well, I think they did too. We did a little tour more up north. I don't think like Mobtown did a cross country, but the rest of the band, I don't know. I think okay. So I think for the rest of the band, I think with mainstream picking up a different, more of a different sound, more of a ska punk sound, I think that took off a lot more than kind of the traditional scene. I'm not 100% sure why that was. It was just, I don't know if it was catchier, it was more commercialized, more people liked it. But yeah, I mean, that took off and we kind of just stayed here. You know,
I think it's actually, a lot of the bands did tour. Allen did a cross-country, Debonaires, C-Spot did, C-Spot went to Japan. It's just that they did it once. Right. You know, Steady 45 went to Europe, but they did it once. Delirious also did some touring, but they did it once. It's not consistent, and that's why you feel like, how come no one gets anywhere? They try, but it's not because it's just, you know, they did it once. Mm-hmm. And once sometimes it's not good enough. People want the band to be out there constantly, but they don't understand sometimes the workings, the back workings of how much work it is to get actually a band out on the road.
So, Luis, you work with Bucket and Moonscape on their second California Ska compilation. Talk about that experience.
Yeah.
What was it like for you?
Well, they reached out to me and they asked me, they wanted to put this together and they wanted me to put it together. So first I was honored. I'm like, wow, they're reaching out to me. At the time, also, I had a lot of things going on in LA. There's so many stuff going on. So it's like, it was perfect. It was like synergy. Everything was happening at the same time. So I got to it because, and if you look at the comp, it really covers the ska what it was at the time, versus just like the traditional or just the ska punk or whatever the flavor of the month is. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to make sure it was represented in California. I did take a few listens to the first California Ska Quake to get a feel and a vibe for what they did then. And when I put together the second one, I think I did a real good job. I think I did. So one of the nice parts was when I flew over to New York to deliver all the tapes, because I had all the at the time there were DATs. You had DAT tapes, the master DAT. So I had them all in my case, and I flew over to New York and I turned them over. I said, here's the compilation. I gave them the sequence of everything how it should. I even did input on the artwork. And it was fun. It was good. It was it was a very nice experience because at the same time I got to reach out to bands that I normally would not have worked with.
Mhm.
You know, it made me grow. It made me grow because there were some bands that, like, I've heard of that band, but I don't know if I would work with them because they're regional. And I don't know if I'd actually call them and say, hey, you know what, come down from some whatever, Stockton, come down from Stockton, because usually they don't have a big following outside of Stockton, or they don't have a big following outside of San Jose, or a big following outside of Oakland, or a big following outside of whatever town they're from. And sometimes I do that when there was a big show, I'd bring someone out, like, hey, sandwich you in there to get you a little more popular, so that way at some point you can come by yourself and not rely on the local talent to build talent.
Mhm.
So yeah, it made me reach out to different bands in different areas that probably I wouldn't have, and you know, it expanded my horizons.
Mhm.
So it was a very positive experience.
Yes, I bet. Mhm. So Eric and I have worked with you, Luis, on bringing to Los Angeles several ska and rocksteady legends: Justin Hines, Monty Morris, Derek Morgan, Phyllis Dillon. How was your experience working with those bands? Oh, you're listening. I thought you were talking. Yeah, how was your experience working with those bands, and any feedback from the musicians, the players of instruments?
Yeah, you know, working with those bands or those artists is the feedback is always positive, because they're always, I mean, I don't know, I mean, they're hustling or saying, yeah, man, your musicians are the best. But they always do. They're like, these are the best musicians I've played. These are top of the line. They know what they're doing, et cetera, et cetera. And I hear it from every top artist that comes, that you and Eric had brought over. And, you know, because usually when you did that, I put together the backing band. You know, if it was, you know, Brian Dixon and some of his guys that later on became the Rhythm Doctors, or, you know, et cetera, Aggrolites, or if it wasn't, you know, like the Allentons or Kingston 10 or any of these guys back in these artists, the artists always say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are top-notch musicians. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, because I've seen videos of them playing in other towns, and there's a backing band. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Where's the horns? You have keyboards. What's happening? But you know,
They would love to too.
yeah, and you know, so it's a very, you know, so some of these shows, you know, they're not big money makers, but you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because the passion of the music, and on top of that, you get to meet some of your favorite artists that otherwise you wouldn't be able to meet. This is kind of the only avenues where you can actually,
Walk up to a legend and say,
you know,
hi.
exactly. Walk up to a legend and say, I take a picture with the legend. Yeah, it's probably going to cost you $1,000 because you lost that much, but it's okay. You met a legend, you know.
And it did work.
I mean, it's a positive experience.
Yes.
all the time. Right?
Wonderful, man. Wonderful.
I always want to thank you guys for doing that, because you always had, because, you know, Eric ran the magazine, and he always had his finger on the pulse of the international artists coming to town. And he always did. And I always wanted to thank you guys for hey, listen, we're looking for someone to work with. And thank you for choosing me at the time.
Yes, wonderful. And you also brought Desmond Decker to town before that. Was he your first legend? San Pedro. I'd never ever heard of San Pedro before. And by then I had lived here for a couple of years. San Pedro. I said, where is that? Well, I sound like I'm far place, you know?
Yeah, I did. He was one of the early guys, one of the first ones that I brought over, I guess, because, you know, right now, 95, 96, 97, those years are blurred to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. 96 or 98, was it 7 or 95? There's so many things happened in those years, you know?
Yeah, but I thought Desmond was before Derek Morgan and those guys.
Yes, he was. And so we met there was no venue available at the time when he was coming to town. So I had the Waters Club, which is actually about 5 blocks away from here on Pacific and 13th. And Desmond Decker stayed at a hotel right here in San Pedro up the street.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how well advertised the show was, but because I didn't hear it on some of the mainstream, well, not mainstream, but radio stations that play reggae at the time. I heard through Eric, who will be joining us momentarily. I said, no, the real Desmond Decker from Jamaica, and say, yes, man. So I went down.
Yeah.
What a night that was.
You know, Steady Beat always has traveled in the underground. You know, it's always been underground. Even though I've always reached out to media outlets, sometimes they don't cover. They're like, it's not worth it for us. It's ska, it's not poppy ska. It's this slow ska that no one and the skinheads forget about it. Let's not talk about that. So, and I'm okay with it. I'm like, that's fine. You know, we all have our own.
Mm-hmm. And was Desmond Decker backed by a local band? Because my memory is foggy. Because I didn't hardly know anyone at the time.
He was backed by the Aces.
Oh, so they brought their own band in. They were on tour.
Yes. Although he didn't have horns, he had a keyboard player, which I was like, you should have called. We could have Coach Joe and horns.
Oh, yeah, right. Maybe that's why I didn't enjoy that show so much. Because once Eric introduced me to the scene and I heard all these guys playing horns, that was my baptism, because I was used to seeing in New York and then move out here. Most of the like 4-piece band and 5 pieces. I wasn't really ready for that. But once I got introduced to the horns, that was it for me. No turning back. No turning back. No turning back, sir. So if I were to ask you about a moment, maybe 1 or 2 defining moments with Mobtown, Luis, since Kat worked with them and you worked with Kat during that time. Any memories you can share about working with Mobtown and perhaps Kat at the time? Anything that stands out, so to speak?
A few, because when we first started doing shows in backyards, I was dealing with Wally and Wally's pop, and they were always gung ho about it. Any opportunity, any show, they're like, yes, we'll do it. And I always, and it seemed like they understood the fight, and we were fighting the same fight. You know, they're like, we'll do it. You have a show, let's make it happen. Whether it's a junkyard, a backyard, a warehouse, you name it. They were. So one of the moments I remember when I was like, wow, is because when Wally asked me, hey, we want you to put out the Mobtown CD. And at the time, it would have been like the first official Steady Beat full-length album that I would have done. And because prior to that was just a compilation.
And what year, if you can recall?
95.
That'd be 96.
96.
96, maybe 97. But I'm thinking 96. And when they approached me for that, I was like, whoa. I really felt honored about that. And I felt like, wow, really like me. You guys really like me. You entrust me with this. So, and there was the first CD. And, when the band does their first CD, all their heart and soul is in that CD. They're like, they put they don't think about the second CD. They think everything we know, everything we want.
Put it on the CD.
Exactly. So, and I knew that. And we ran with it. And I said, yeah. I remember sitting down and working out the details at Wally's house. And just thinking, walking away thinking, wow, this is really happening. I'm on my way. We're on our way. Those, and then, a bunch of the times where there would be up on stage playing, and I would see them, and like, it'd happen more than once, so I would look at them like, wow, they're there. They've got their thing going on. The crowd is loving it. And I'm like, these guys are there. They're where they need to be. It's just that sometimes bands before their time. Not everyone appreciates it.
So, Kat, was there a lot of rehearsing then?
That was a lot of rehearsing. We rehearsed.
What is considered a lot for a non-musician?
We would rehearse twice a week from 9 p.m. to midnight. That would go over sometimes, right? So it was like Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then we would have shows, Fridays and Saturdays, or Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we were always kind of together at some point, for a good couple of years. I think that was like 94, 95, 96, where it was just constant shows and constant rehearsing.
Yeah, that was like when you played Ska and Mobtown. I mean, yeah, John, and C-spot, and just like over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gets exciting more and more by the moment. Kat, can you please share with us the documentary film, how it's coming about? I'm sure you're at liberty to talk about it at this particular point.
Okay, so Luis and I are doing a documentary film on the 90s Los Angeles ska scene. So we called it A Steady Beat, because it's been a steady beat for the last 30 years. You know, a lot of people haven't really heard this type of ska. You know, with Luis RGP, when I first started talking about ska with him, you know, all he knew about ska was, you know, Sublime, No Doubt, things like that. I was like, oh no, there's a whole another world of all of this. So really what we're doing this film for is to highlight and honor the bands, the people, the scene, the fashion, all the craziness, and then really the rise and fall of that particular decade in ska in LA. That's basically the gist of it, right? Yeah. So and with that, we're doing it from a steady beat perspective, and kind of using that as a timeline of the bands that came out during that time from steady beat recording, rather than, you know, kind of all the other stuff that went on during that time.
So here's a question for both of you. How much content, videos, photos, etc., do you have available to pull from, and how is the quality, so to speak?
Between all the photos and the footage.
This is the first question for both of
you. Many hours. I can't even put a number on it. But there's a lot. There's a lot to go through. At one point, you know, I had a photographer, and
Luis, sorry to rudely interrupt. You're drifting to your right. Can you drift closer to the right? No, but right now, but yeah, you were drifting. Go ahead.
What I was saying is, at one point, like 95, 96, I had a photographer that just took a lot of pictures of every show, of every band, and there's boxes and boxes of those photos. And then also all the shows at the Whiskey were videotaped. Wow. So there's tapes and tapes, all those performances there. Some tapes, actually, I was going back and I can't find them. I don't know if someone borrowed them, or there's a few tapes missing because I see the box, but the tape is gone. I'm like, what happened? But it might pop up somewhere. So yeah, there's a lot of hours of footage. Also, there was a couple different, I would say, cable shows that were going on, like Ska. What was it? There was a couple ones. Illegal Interns was another one. Richard, who would come to my shows and film the shows just for kicks, and then put them on his show for his local cable access.
That's all you channel. Trailer, right? Yeah.
And there was other, like Ska, was it Ska Fever, Ska News or something like that, that did, they also had cable access. They would come to shows, film, and I have all of their episodes. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can go through. And a lot of their episodes actually showed live footage from the shows, interviews with bands, local bands, and then also videos from national bands. You know, they mix it all up. So you have, you know, in the episode, you probably have, interview with the Allentons, and look, the Boss Room video as well. So they mix it up.
Yeah, hold your point for a minute. Eric wants to break in here because you guys are frozen.
Sorry, Luis, Kat, this is Eric. You're frozen on the screen. Maybe just try turning your camera off and back on real quick, if you don't mind.
I'm cruising.
You're
frozen.
You're losing it. Frozen.
Now back on.
There you go.
Boom, there you go.
All right.
I'll be back in a few minutes.
Yeah, and Eric will be rejoining us momentarily.
So he's got a lot of footage.
It seemed more than enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and plus the band.
So what was the thinking during the early days why you decided to have a photographer and someone record the show? Were you thinking about posterity? Were you thinking about 50 years from now, or it just happened randomly?
It was, that was actually not the earliest. It was more like 95, 96. When, and here's exactly what happened. When I was doing Rough and Tough, I think that was like 90, 96, Rough and Tough in Long Beach. There was an individual who'd come in early. He'd come in like before the band would start, just DJing. He'd be ready to go dance. And once the band came on, he was dancing. The only guy dancing there. And I asked him, "What's up?" He came in, he goes, "Hey, I'm an artist, and I do cover art, and I do all this art." I'm like, "Well, great." And then I found out he did all the posters and all the paintings for Tower Records, for all the new albums or all the albums for Tower Records. And then we became friends, and then he did actually the artwork for the Irie Beats album. First Irie Beats album, you open it, and that's his artwork. So with time, he became an artist, and he was also a photographer. And he's like, "Listen, I'm an art photographer. If you want me to take pictures of your shows, I can." I said, "Beautiful. Take pictures of the show." Yeah. So I'd buy in the film. He'd go take pictures like crazy, and then he'd give me the pictures. And that's all the pictures I have. And as a matter of fact, his name is TJ, Troy James. He's going to be doing a mural at this shop right on this wall, probably in the next week and a half.
You still maintain ties with him. That's
that.
wonderful.
Yeah. We're lifelong friends.
My gosh, it's a family affair.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's how I mean, it's not like I hired him.
Yeah.
He was available, and
right.
He learned. Fine, great.
And I don't think anybody really intended to take pictures knowing that we would do something with it. Because I know I always just took pictures, at shows.
Right. Just for memories. And, I just decided at some point, some of these shows should be documented. And if he was there to do it, why not?
Interesting. Yes, sir. So here's a big question now. Why should fans contribute to the Indiegogo? Did I say it right? The fund.
Yes.
The fund that you guys set up. And how else can they support the forthcoming documentary?
It's a story that needs to be told. It's a segment, a timeline that there's not a lot of. You see other ska documentaries, and they kind of bypass LA. And why do they bypass LA? They'll talk about certain things, but in the end, they don't talk about them because they don't understand the LA scene. Mm-hmm. They don't know the LA scene. And usually the people who are doing these documentaries are not from LA. Yeah. So understanding that Kat had a production company, I figured, if you can do this, I think there's a story to be told, because ska is such an international thing. Los Angeles is such an international city. The 90s was a pivotal moment in history. Why is there nothing documenting those three things?
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that's extremely well said.
And it's not about just me, because before me, there was Blackpool. And Blackpool was formed because Ray had a vision. And when that vision came to fruition, he's like, I'm done. I'm like, okay, great. Then I'm going to start Steady. Mm-hmm. And once that started, I didn't say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. No, it was just like, hey, let's do a show. Let's do a show. One show led to the next show. One opportunity to the next opportunity. One venue led to the next venue, and so forth and so forth. One recording led to the next recording. One opportunity to the next opportunity. Before you know it, you're doing things and not realizing that you're building history. You're building things that are going to be looked back later. And it wasn't until later that I realized there's a lot of stuff that we did. Maybe we can talk about it.
You're not kidding. Mm-hmm. So the name, is that Indiegogo?
It's Indiegogo, yes. So it's like a GoFundMe.
So what exactly is that, Kat? My part in question before I introduce Eric.
So it's a crowdfunding platform, Indiegogo. It's kind of like a GoFundMe.
Oh, okay. For the novice like myself, break it down.
So when you go into the website, basically the first thing you're going to see, there's a video up there. It tells the story of how we came up with this, who we are, who the writers are, why we're doing this. We've got some merch on there. We've got the so instead of just donating, because we were kind of like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to be able to afford, this? It gets pretty expensive to make a movie. we didn't want to just beg for money. So it was like, what do we do? How do we get these people to kind of help us? So we got some merch done in exchange for those donations. We've got t-shirts and coffee mugs and pins and patches and things like that in exchange for that.
I'm trying to make myself very disciplined. Huh? I said it was my parting question, so I'm going to really stick to that. But I'm going to use this opportunity to introduce my very good friend. Welcome Eric Kohler to the conversation. And I'm going to ask you, Eric, why don't you take the opportunity to reintroduce our guests, since I didn't do that.
Me?
Yeah, reintroduce the guests. I feel miserable.
We are honored and excited to be talking to and Junor, as always, do a phenomenal job with this. Talking to Kat, formerly of Mobtown and of 150 Productions, and talking to Mr. King Steady Beat himself, Luis. And Luis, you might, and Kat, you might recognize some of these posters here, some shows that we've worked on together. But I'm personally really excited, and I agree 100%. The story absolutely needs to be told, and you know, encourage fans and people out there. And thank you, Junor.
But you keep talking.
We always fight.
That's the only time we fight.
So encourage people to go to it's on social media. So on Facebook, it's A Steady Beat Film, right? And then also on Instagram. All right. And then there's a website.
There is the Indiegogo website.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So if you go to Indiegogo, search a Steady Beat Film, that should open it up so they can kind of see the teaser there. They can see the story of how he came up with this, who the bands are or people are that are going. You guys are going to be on there. Thank you for that. And really just kind of the story of this. And to kind of piggyback on what Luis was saying earlier, you know, it is a story that needs to be told, but it's more than just his story. It's more than just my story. So many people shared these events and these memories. And it's funny because when I talk to people, you know, sometimes I hear people, oh man, that was like the best time. And I had the best, they were just awesome. And I can relate to that because I was around and I was going, so I did the Mobtown thing, but when I wasn't playing in Mobtown, I was out in the crowd dancing and enjoying these bands too. And honestly, they were great memories. And when Luis and I kind of got together talking about it, you know, we were like, look at all these relationships that have formed out of this scene. You know, a lot of friendships that have lasted 30 years now. And, you know, relationships, people got married, people had kids. All these things happened from this little scene that we were all a part of.
Yes.
And we kind of reunited when we lost Jason Wallace. We all kind of reunited. And I hadn't come out in the scene because I got married and had kids and that stuff. So I kind of ducked out for a little bit. Coming back to seeing the same people that I saw 30 years ago. And it was like no time had passed. We were just older, right? But no time had passed. And it was the same feeling and watching the same band that I had seen when I first come out in the scene was just an amazing kind of feeling. And I was like, man, we gotta tell the story. And we gotta share this to the people who don't know about it. And then for the people who do know about it, it's like, you know, this is a flashback. This is nostalgia.
Yeah.
That was our first.
Yeah.
That was
the Lawless tribute. Yeah. I mean, without a doubt, the 90s ska scene and Luis, you know, you were at the forefront of it. Musicianship, I mean, second to none. I mean, just the incredible. You could have every single instrument, you know, and the bands and the singers, and it was an incredible time. And I was thinking the other day, I wasn't sure if the first time I met you and the first Steady Beat show I went to might have been one of your Las Palmas shows, literally where there was one where it was Hepcat and Jump with Joey and Yes Ska. I mean, it was like, does it get any more incredible than that? And, you know, and right, it was probably one of those in like 94, 95 or whatever. And I always had a special bond too with Mobtown, and I grew up in Downey. And if I'm not mistaken, Wally, right? And Mobtown was the band was the ska band that Reggae Nucleus, magazine worked with the most, doing shows and pairing Mobtown, with Ice Soul Jazz or some of the reggae bands. And so, always a very special band to me. Getting to some of the fan questions and some additional questions for me. So Kat, talk about 150 Productions and how that came about, and anything else post Mobtown. You mentioned obviously you got married and had kids, but talk about other things in your life.
I became a teacher. I started teaching.
Wow.
So I teach human anatomy and physiology for a couple of different medical programs.
Okay.
Usually, private college. I did that for a while. Got kind of bored of that a little bit. Met Luis, got into film, and I started in film doing extra work. Quickly realized that I didn't really like being in front of the camera. I liked being behind the camera. So started kind of learning about production and was asked to be on some really, really awesome films and learn from amazing mentors and people. And, one day Luis and I just kind of decided to start a production company. Thought it'd be fun because at that time people were asking us, hey, can we work on our films? Or, and Luis was the camera guy. I was either the producer or the script supervisor. So I was responsible for gathering money and kind of managing things and just kind of putting things together. So it kind of came natural for both of us to like, hey, maybe we can do this on our own. So we've had a couple of people come with scripts, and we've helped them out on those. So we did this about 2018 when we really started to call ourselves 150 Productions, and just kind of been working. So sometimes we do our own stuff. Somebody will come to us with a script and we'll kind of produce our movie. Sometimes it's just us working as crew. I love it because to me, in every set that I've ever been on, I'm always learning something new.
Great experience.
I got to do this today. That's like, all right, I'm learning how to put up lights.
And great networking. Networking, you never know who you might meet.
Absolutely. I mean, Luis and I have worked with Dean Cundy, who did like Halloween, Back to the Future, I'm like, it's such an awesome feeling to be able to work with people like that.
And just to clarify, since we're talking about two different Lewises, there's Luis next to you, King Steady Beat, and then the Luis that you're talking about, Luis P.
Should we have him come and say hi?
He can absolutely step in and say hi.
This was Luis. So I'm stuck between two Luises, and this is
hello, Luis.
That's Luis.
Luis.
Luis. Not this guy.
Thing one, thing two.
All right.
Luis, he's got Luis.
All right.
So he's my partner in 150 Productions. So
yes,
we kind of work a lot of films together.
All right. Excellent. Luis, you were part of the very first History of LA Ska panel discussion that Junor and I put together. Junor moderated at the Grand Museum back in 2017. It was you, Joey Altruda, Persephone Laird, Greg Lee, Brian Dixon, that was really one of the main catalysts for Junor and I doing this platform. Talk about what that panel and what that night meant to you.
Oh, first of all, thank you for inviting me to that. Second of all,
we had four people fall out, so you were up. No, I'm kidding.
but in doing so, it kind of I'm not gonna say justify, but kind of like validated. Say, oh, listen, I was part of this. There's a scene that happened, and I'm part of this, and they want me to talk about it. And I felt validated. I felt honored to be part of that panel. And once there, honestly, when we were backstage, me and Greg were talking. I'm like, man, I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous. Stage and announcing a band, you're actually going to be on a spotlight, and people are going to ask you questions directly. you have to answer questions. And he's like, you maybe should eat, man. Maybe eating would kind of take the nerves away. All right, give me a sandwich. So I started eating sandwich. But once we got out there, it was pretty cool. Very mellow, very easygoing. It was just a conversation. And there was a lot of things that we discussed that, like, me and a bunch of other people were like, we need to keep talking more about certain aspects of this. There's the street that we're on, but there's so many alleys that we need to go into to discover different things that people don't talk about. And that's kind of the feeling I have. Now, you should do another one. By different people or with different perspectives or I don't know. But I just thought people wanted more.
It was interrupted because of the virus, the coronavirus, the pandemic.
Yeah, because we
had one set. Yeah, the pandemic interrupted things.
Yeah, we did the second one, the November 2019. But
and then February,
without a doubt, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to continue this. First on IGTV, and then obviously now through this platform. But that was a very special night, and I clearly meant a lot.
We had a packed house.
Yeah, packed house. But thank you for sharing those words. Luis, you mentioned Rich from Israelites as a promoter. There are obviously throughout the greater LA and Southern California area, other promoters that you've worked with on occasion, just namely thinking Daryl from Stiff Dog, you even co-promoted with Tazy, kind of blending a couple of the different ska worlds, so to speak. But are there other, what's that?
He's on Showcase Theater, Corona.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, because I was going to ask other promoters.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah. Makeda, San Diego.
After Makeda left the World Beat Center.
Right.
Yeah.
What was there? Talk about. Then there were some more mainstream, promoters like the Golden Voices or 98 Posses that were doing some of this. But talk about some of your favorite venues to work with, or co-promoters, or show highlights. I think about obviously the Intensified, but talk about some of those.
Well, not every club is friendly to work with. You have to make it friendly. You have to make it,
right.
worth your while. Everyone has their rules. Like, for instance, when I was doing the Hong Kong Cafe, that was like the Wild Wild West. It was all ages. And the guy said, we have a bar. It's a full bar. You have all ages. Just check your IDs at the door. Oh, wow. Because the bartender your ID. So, venues like that are cool, but you have to bring in all your security, doing all that. Then there's venues like BB King. When I did shows at BB King, they treated you well.
I remember the Scatolites there.
Yeah, they have a reputation, and Scatolites played there with Scatolites, HR from Bad Brains, and a bunch of bands that I was working out of there for like a year and a half, and that was a nice place to work with because they had a restaurant, and you walk in there, they're like, "What do you want to eat?" And there you go. Use your backstage area, go hang out, and it's all like that. House of like that too. It was a very, very nice place to work with, and obviously these high-end places are very nice to work with because they treat you well because they expect a really good show, and usually they do get a good show. So yeah, there's and then there's venues like Las Palmas Theater or Terraza Jamai, who said, "Give me the money and do whatever you want with the movie."
Right, take it over.
Yeah, exactly. But you make sure that you have security because I don't want a riot. and that's kind of the rule, And you're like, okay, so hey, and that's how things. Every club is different, so you try to find the fun in every venue.
When you did that whiskey and Roxy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Roxy whiskey, real challenge, but at the same time, it was exciting because I don't think anyone's ever done that.
No, that was monumental. That was the Intensified, right?
Yes.
How many bands at each venue?
It was 18 bands, and there was 9 bands each venue.
I don't know. Did you go to that one?
No, sir. I don't
We
think I
walked
came
back
at
and
I hadn't
forth.
come on the scene as yet.
It
Was
was
it a weeknight?
underground.
Was it a I missed those. Was it a weeknight or weekend?
It was May 7th, 2000, no, 1997. No. It was May. No.
before
It
that.
was actually it was May birthday weekend, 1997. Yeah, it was May 27th. I remember that weekend because that same weekend, Daryl, Stiff Dog, I asked him for a favor. I said, man, I need a favor.
Yeah, we were-
because I double booked my.
No, I missed those.
This weekend, I have Yeska and Ozumatli playing in San Francisco and Sacramento.
Right.
Manager, because I can't do that because I have to intensify West Coast Ska Festival. And Daryl said, you know what? It's my birthday that weekend, but I'll do it. So he did it. And you know, the Sunday, Yeska and Ozumatli stopped by in San Pedro, picked me up, and then they did a festival in Ensenada the next day.
Wow.
And then we came home the next day. That was a wild weekend.
What a weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, I missed
What?
those.
Yeah.
What memories? Yeah.
Yeah.
Next question, Luis. What band would maybe your fans or fans for the ska scene be surprised about you working with over the years? Is there one band where it would completely surprise fans?
Well, there's, I don't know. Back in the day, I was working with a lot of weird bands.
Did you work
Good
with?
one.
You promoted Supply?
You know what band I think would be the Brian Jonestown Massacre.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What genre?
They're from the Bay Area, and I booked them at the Hong Kong Cafe when I was doing like indie pop nights.
Yeah,
Because
more rock.
once they
rock.
saw, they're like, hey, what else can you do? I'm like, okay, I like these bands, so I booked the Brian Jonestown Massacre
Okay, yeah.
and Sound Man, which brought like a 24 channel board. I'm like, bro, it's not that serious, you know. But they rocked it, and they had the whole wall of sound thing going on. They had their fans there. It was nice. And after that, I was like, wow. And then later on, they become pretty big and pretty famous. And I was like, oh, I remember this guy. Anton's the guitar player. But I think that, also Crash Worship.
Who?
Yeah, see, exactly. Right?
Wait,
Crash Worship.
Trash worship. Worship. Okay.
Crash
Right.
Worship.
Okay.
They usually have some tribal drummers and guys lighting firecrackers and fire during in the audience. They have like half naked go-go girls dancing. It's a wild party. It's a show. Them and Neurosis was one night that I booked both of them together with Jason when we made Jason the Short Bus production. Yeah, that's another band. And Hawkwind. That's another band I booked, Hawkwind. That is the sax player for, I don't know, man. Hawkwind. Those bands are bands that I'm like, wow, people would never think that I worked with Crash Worship, Neurosis,
Right.
Lagwagon.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
those are far out.
Some good answers. The next question comes from somebody who we all know, Matt Munoz, Minto Baru. Says hello. He says hello. Says hello to you both, Kat and Luis. Couple questions. One is, Luis, how was it dealing with the Angry Skins when the business canceled the show that you threw?
That's a good one.
Okay.
You might have to paint the picture there.
All right. Here's how it went down. I was working with that guy Jason, Shortbird Productions, and we're working with an agency, and the agency always like gave us bands that are coming to town. And he's like, hey man, the business comes to town. Like, oh, the business really? Oh, wow, that's weird. And like, oh, they haven't toured here in a while.
And for those that don't know, what kind of band is the business?
Like hardcore punk.
Okay.
Hardcore oi punk.
Okay.
More like skinhead, beathead punk. And I was like, yeah, you know, it was sellout. And I talked to some friends like, yeah, man. And then I'm like, you know what? I think I could do it. So then I booked like a bunch of like, you know, skinhead, you know, punk bands, oi bands. And it was a whole show and it was doing good. And then I was selling tickets at Bleecker Bob's. And even Bleecker Bob was like, wow, you got the business, man. That should be a good show. I'm like, yeah, it should be. We're selling tickets like crazy. So it was going to be at Las Palmas Theater. And then the night of the show, the day of the show, I get there and there's locks on the door. And I call the manager, the owner. He's like, no, man, we're not going to have the show here, man. I heard of the band and we don't want riots. And we're not going to have the show here. I was like, hey,
And this is the afternoon of.
That afternoon, it was like 5:30 in the afternoon, and the show was that night. And I'm like, you're gonna have riots here anyway, bro. I don't know. So he's like, you know what? Maybe you should try another club over here. Our buddy owns this club. I went over there. No, that place is not. It's a restaurant. Forget about it. It's gonna be out of control. So finally, I got a hold of the anti-club, and I talked to the anti-club, and I explained to them the situation. It's like, well, you know, we had 2 bands cancel, and if you really think the show's gonna do good, I said, listen, we already got over 100 tickets sold. I'm gonna give you $2 for every ticket that comes in, or maybe it was $5 for every ticket that comes in, whatever. But just accept tickets that came in. That's it. Because I don't want a riot because we already sold 100 tickets and I want those people to get in. And they're like, okay, we can do that. I'm like, beautiful. So then I get in. I'm literally outside of the club, the Las Palmas Theater, where it's shut down, and the manager there and like 2 guys of the band, and I'm explaining that to them. And they're like, well, let's go. We'll go in your car. So they jumped in my car. I'm like, okay, and went all the way to the anti-club. And they the van followed us there. And once we got there, they're like, okay, all right, it's for real. It's legit. Because they were like, what's going to happen? So finally, we got there. They started loading up. Everything was good. I worked it out with the club owner. Here's what's going to happen. And they said, okay, fine. So then I'm chilling. I'm like, okay, man. And I was telling some of the opening bands, like, listen, I don't think all the bands are going to be playing. And they're like, no, we're all going to be playing. I'm like, okay, then you're all going to be playing. And they all just shortened their sets. So I said, great, shorten your sets, played everything was set up. And then I found out that the club owner was accepting $10 bills from people that are coming in without tickets. Brand new people. I say, you can't do that. There's a bunch of lines. There's a line up there with people with tickets. And she goes, well, they're paying customers. I say, well, the other people already paid for the tickets. They have tickets. Let them in first. I said, listen, I can't be responsible for you acting dumb like this. You got to take those tickets first before you accept money. I already told you I was going to. And at that point, I hung out for a while. And then I walked outside and I saw the crowd getting wild. And I'm like, oh, and then I saw a fence go down. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I think maybe it's time to go. So then me and my homie, Jason, the guy who booked the band, who I booked the band with, I said, bro, we got to get it. He goes, no, we can't leave. I said, well, you want to stay? Because shit's going to go, it's going to go bad. He goes, no, I can't leave yet because I promised them a case of beer. I said, where's your beer? It's like, oh, it's over there. And so we got the case of beer. We dropped it off at their van. And then I said, okay, let's go. And then we're leaving. People are pointing him out. He goes, there's a promoter. He's stealing our money. And I said, Jason,
you're running.
We jumped in my car and we left.
You're kidding.
We had some Del Taco. No, I'm not kidding.
Why?
Wow.
Not kidding. And then the next day, the booking agent called me. I said, listen, man, anti-club. And then I called the anti-club, and she was arguing with me too. I'm like, dude, this just went south bad. It was bad. And that was that story. I mean, there's more.
I'm not sure why you took off. Why you couldn't control the crowd?
Well, yeah, because the crowd was beyond my control.
I mean, why?
Why? Because
unruly.
You're a crowd of crazy oi skinheads. You know, there's no reasoning. There's no reasoning. You just gotta, hey, you know, I was using the gambler's rule. You know the gambler's rule? You gotta know when to hold them. You gotta know when to fold them. You gotta know when to walk away. And when to run. And I ran. I'm sorry.
You know, I would have done the same. I would have done the same. Oh, that's
okay,
amazing.
tell me, what's the outcome?
I thought they knew you and respected you as a promoter, and you could calm them down. I'm speculating now.
Well, the thing was that the band, the headlining band had already got their deposit. I mean, I think they were only missing like maybe $400. I'm like, we'll work that out later somehow. And my whole issue was with the owner that started accepting money from people while people had outside. And at that point, it was out of my control.
Very unprincipled.
And I couldn't. I told her what not to do, but she said, "Well, they're paying customers." And I said, "Then this problem is yours," and that's why.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great one.
So, Matt, that's how I deal with it, Matt.
I'm sure. I think Matt would have stayed, but we'll get his thoughts on this.
What a night.
Second question for Matt: will the Ska Authentic compilation ever be issued on vinyl? Luis.
Yes, it will.
All right.
When, I don't know. But we all can hope and dream, right?
We all can. We all can.
But yeah,
Kat,
that's something I want to happen.
okay.
And if I want it bad enough, it will happen. But
Yeah.
it's in time.
Can you rattle off some other bands that are on that compilation? I'm just curious.
What's that?
Can you rattle off
Name
some
of
of
the
the
band.
names of the bands that are on the compilation?
C-Spot, Dynamics, King Willie, Israelites, Hefcat, Yes God,
Oh, it must go out.
Joey, Los
Oh, it has to go out.
Hooligans,
It's a who's who.
No, you have to put it out.
Mobtown.
Oh, it has to go
yeah,
out.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
The world is ready for it.
I have it on CD over here somewhere.
Oh, it's okay.
I'll find it. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
I would love nothing more. Kat, talk about some of the bands that are on the scene now that you're a fan of and that you encourage some of our listeners and viewers to check out.
Pre-pandemic, right?
Yeah.
What you're talking about?
Essentially,
Yeah,
because
or
everything
any
is
that
dead,
are
right?
out there on the scene active.
Yeah, they're out now. It's been so long since I've gone. You know what? It's been so long since, and I'm being totally honest with you. It's been so long since I've gone to shows. I started coming back out. One of my favorite bands now would be the Freak Tones. I kind of saw them a couple months.
Oh,
Yeah.
Steve and Jeff,
Yeah.
my Mobtown brothers are in that. Noe's in that from the Allington.
Yeah. Great lineup.
You know, but with going back to what I was saying, I haven't come out in such a long time. I think the Freak Tones were one of the first bands that, where I started going to shows again that I actually went and saw.
Mhm.
And then when we did that Jason Wallace tribute, I saw all the old bands all over again. So I that would be number one for sure. I'm trying to think my memories.
So what have you lost interest?
I don't think I've lost interest. I've
Oh.
still always listened to all my. I've got a lot of records and 45s at home. I've always listened to ska. I think I've just been so busy with working. My job kind of it's one of those things where yes, it's a 9-to-5 job or whatever, but I'm also working a lot at home because it's kind of a thinking job, and a lot of the time I'm writing the curriculum. With film, you have to do kind of pre-production work and then being on set. So I've just been busy
Sure.
to go to shows, just stuff. But no love lost as far as the ska scene and the music, none at all.
Luis, talk about some of the other exciting projects, and I know that you DJ quite regularly. You both are sitting in an undisclosed location. I don't know if you want to tease or talk about that, but also you've released some other a little more Latin-oriented music as of late, which is top quality. But talk about some of the other steady beat activities.
Just recently, Alex Santos Orchestra released their 7-inch. Going to release another 7-inch by the Smoke and Mirrors sound system headed by John Roy out of San Diego.
Mhm.
And some projects I personally been working on called the Royal Palms. It's a couple student musicians I put together and play some of the music I want them to play, and that's some other 7-inches I'm putting out. Aside from that, I've decided to open a record store that I've been working on probably for the last 2 to 3 months. Kind of keeping it quiet, you know. This last month has been kind of like ramping things up, getting things ready, because I kind of want to have a soft opening next week, soft opening. And, you know, throughout the month of September, I plan to have guest DJs coming in every weekend and playing whatever they want to play, bringing in people and hoping that people are going to like the selections that they're going to find at Steady Beat Records.
And where is the
What city?
Yeah, what city?
It's going to be in San Pedro on Gaffey and.
Junior knows where
So the
San
town-
Pedro is now.
Yes.
The town Junior has never heard of before. So, yeah.
That was when Desmond came. I know everywhere in Southern California now as a result of Eric and Reggae Nucleus.
There was Junior, there was a picture I reposted on Facebook that was like 10 years ago. It was you, me, and Monty Morris at
Yes.
the brew company in San.
Right. No, I've been to San Pedro many times. You used to do an event. You used to event down there. I rolled through a couple of times, and I have a good friend live down there. No, I've been everywhere. Mhm.
So yeah, it's going to be here on Gaffey Street, and you know, come visit us.
Mhm.
The debut.
Yeah.
So you
The first time
presently have an
people are-
online store now, right? Now you're going for brick and mortar and cement.
Well, I had online Steady Beat recordings for the label, but this is also going to be an online store just specifically for the store. It's not going to have, it will have Steady Beat releases on it, but it's going to have more stuff from the store online.
And when you say store, you mean you'll be open 9 to 5,
Like a
7 days
retail
week, like
location.
Tower, one of those.
This is the actual shop. It's going to be open from 10 or 11 to
There you go. Right. Just for clarity. Sir.
Friday and Saturday, depending.
Mhm.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great.
Nice.
You know, going back to, you were talking earlier about the Desmond Decker show down at the Waters Club. And Luis, thank you, because Junior and I got the interview. We got to sit, was it upstairs? We got to sit, I think, and interview Desmond. And
Yeah, that was
right.
the balcony in the back.
Yeah, the balcony, there we go. And Delroy, his manager, I'll never forget, because half the questions Delroy answered for.
How about all the questions? Yeah, I'd never had an experience like that where you ask an artist question and the manager answers.
Yeah,
Every question.
but it was,
And it was no hostility or animosity. You know, I'm not even a foreigner. I think we come from Jamaica, so I have a certain understanding that Desmond and his manager has, but every question his manager answers.
maybe he was trying to be helpful. I don't know.
No, but Desmond wasn't drunk. He just wouldn't give him a chance. I don't think we were able to publish the interview.
Maybe not.
Because it wasn't coming from Desmond, it was coming from his manager.
Yeah.
You should do it. You should publish it anyways.
I need to acknowledge this one here, Phyllis Dillon, and how special this show was, Louis.
That was the year when we had the 9/11.
Yeah, that was
night.
that was the end of September, you know, a few weeks after September 11th. Yeah. That was quite a memorable show in so many ways. And then down here there's the Derek Morgan. Yeah, a few of them. Yeah, some good memories.
Justin,
Justin
Yeah,
Hines.
that was the show.
That was the first one.
Right.
The first legend that I had the opportunity to work with. Yeah, down there in Pasadena. We're up there in Pasadena. As we're nearing an end here, Luis, what have we not touched on that you would like to talk about and to share with our audience? And then same question for you, Kat.
I think there's a lot of We discussed a lot. I mean,
yeah.
but pretty much it's, you know, you should donate to the Indiegogo. Because, I mean, the more you donate, the better chances is that we'll get a more complete story.
And it's a three-part story, so we're cutting that decade. So it's starting from about 89 to 2000. We're cutting into three parts.
And can you drill down there a little bit and explain a little bit about those three parts?
About the beginning, we're starting a little bit. We were originally going to start about 90, but then we realized, you know, there was already a ska scene here, kind of in between the two-tone and the specs and things that was going on. So that third wave kind of thing. So we backed up a year, about 89. So we're going from 89 to about 93, then 94 to about 97. So 89 to about 93 is kind of called the beginnings, right? The beginning of everything, the beginnings of Steady Beat, a lot of those bands that kind of started around that time too. A lot of the bands that we have on the panel. Yeah, the Blackpool years. And then, so the next timeline would be, what did I say?
94.
So 94 to about 96,
Like
97
like that.
is when everything like really like kicked up as far as the scene, when all the bands were just really on point from what I remember. You know, being in Mobtown, playing a lot of shows during that time. Like I said, we would practice twice a week and then we would have 3 shows, but there was all kinds of shows going on at the time, other than even just Lewis. And then from that point on, it would be 97 to about 2000, which the way we kind of sum that up is a lot of the live bands weren't around anymore. I mean, they were still around, but there was a lot less shows from what I remember during that time. And then the DJs started coming out, you know, instead of those live bands throwing big shows, it was DJs. From what I remember. So that's kind of the way we're breaking that down.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that helps paint a good picture too for the fans.
By 2002, 2003, that's when Blue Beat Lounge started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
That time, right? 2001, 2003, 2002.
I don't have the ability to remember these things.
Yeah. It was in the vacuum that, you know, there was no more Steady Beat shows as I was doing like, what, 2 or 3 a week.
Yeah.
It became more like every 2 to 3 weeks. And then, you know, Chris, Brian, and Brad decided, hey, we need a monthly thing. And they did it every Tuesday right there in Hollywood, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. They carried the torch, so to speak. So, Kat, anything that we haven't talked about that you would also like to share? Anything else?
Well, yeah, I think it's just about covered everything. Right now, we're just, you know, we've got a little over 30 days to just get more support for the film. And again, we're not, and the reason why it's the amount of money is there is because we're not trying to do a kind of like, hey, let's just grab a video camera and just film like we used to. We're kind of trying to make it a professional thing where we can, you know, enter it into film festivals, where it can kind of be lined up with all the other, you know, kind of films or documentaries that are out there, and really opening up the scene to people who don't know about the film.
Right.
And,
right.
you know, when I was saying earlier, you know, when you mention ska to a lot of people, you know, it's instant, no doubt, it's instant sublime. And I'm not, you know, downplaying any of those bands. I'm glad they made it and kind of opened those doors, but there's a different scene and there's a different sound with just, you know, equally wonderful bands.
Yeah, absolutely.
That people don't know about. So another thing that we're doing coming up is we are going to, other than the Indiegogo, so we've got a couple of private donors, we've got the Indiegogo contributions. We're planning on doing a fundraising show sometime October 23rd, about there. We kind of have to see how it goes because of the pandemic and kind of like, oh my God, with all these things happening, I'll go into lockdown again. So hopefully, that doesn't happen. But we're shooting for October 23, something like that, to do a fundraiser show. And with that, we're going to attempt to try to bring in some bands that from the 90s that are on our panel that are still around now. So I think that's going to be really exciting for us and for all the fans and supporters out there, just to kind of see them all again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, no, thank you for sharing some additional insight, and definitely have fans be on the lookout for other ways to support and get out there and see some live music. Junior, any parting words?
No. I'm completely satisfied with the discussion so far. Been very enlightening. I've learned a lot.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I have as well. As always.
I feel sad that I missed some of those shows. 18 bands. I'm not sure what I was doing back then. I mean, real sad,
Junior, there's going to be a documentary you can watch.
Yeah. I guess that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
What was that? I'm sorry.
There's film from those bands from that show.
Yes,
but if I'm not there, it's a difference. Because I was here in Los Angeles, and I had been introduced to the scene by then. Yeah, it is what it is, sir.
Yeah, but honored to help and be involved. So thank you both for inviting us, and thank you both for being part of this interview tonight. And
so our guests have been Kathy. Can you say her last name?
Aguirre. Right?
Aguirre, former bass, right side keyboardist from Mobtown and co-founder of 150 Productions, and Luis Correa, aka King Steady Beat, a household name here in Southern California, from Steady Beat Recording. Both are also behind the forthcoming documentary, A Steady Beat, Chronicles of the Los Angeles 90s Ska scene. I want to thank you both for your time. It's been wonderful.
Donate, follow our pages.
Yes, wonderful.
Yes.
And I want to remind our awesome viewers and listeners to follow us at History of LA Ska on Instagram, subscribe to YouTube channel, and join our Facebook group. Follow me on Instagram at Junor Francis. This series is produced by my good friend Eric Kohler for Rockery Radio. Please follow at Rockery_radio on Instagram for fresh rock, rhythm, soul, and Jamaican music inspired daily playlists. Once again, I thank each and everyone for listening, viewing, and for actually participating.
Yes. Kat, Luis, yes, who's also there in the background. And Junior, thank you all so much, and appreciate all the support out there, listeners, viewers. All the best with coming closer to reaching your goals, and with the rest of the all the hard work that goes into making and preparing a documentary. So thank you both. Junior, as always, amazing work. And until next time, thank you all.